Be generous in prosperity and thankful in adversity. Be worthy of the trust of thy neighbor, and look upon him with a bright and friendly face. Be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answerer of the cry of the needy, a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge. Be fair in thy judgment and guarded in thy speech. Be unjust to no man, and show all meekness to all men. Be as a lamp unto them that walk in darkness, a joy to the sorrowful, a sea for the thirsty, a haven for the distressed, an upholder and defender of the victim of oppression. Let integrity and uprightness distinguish all thine acts. Be a home for the stranger, a balm to the suffering, a tower of strength for the fugitive. Be eyes to the blind, and a guiding light unto the feet of the erring. Be an ornament to the countenance of truth, a crown to the brow of fidelity, a pillar of the temple of righteousness, a breath of life to the body of mankind, an ensign of the hosts of justice, a luminary above the horizon of virtue, a dew to the soil of the human heart, an ark on the ocean of knowledge, a sun in the heaven of bounty, a gem on the diadem of wisdom, a shining light in the firmament of thy generation, a fruit upon the tree of humility. Baha'u'llah.
So today we're really happy to have Mr. Kelly Whalen, and he'll be talking about ethics in corporations from a Baha'i perspective. Kelly Whalen is the Chief Executive Officer of CBAI Associates, a federal contracting company specializing in technical and professional services. In 2016, Kelly founded Whalen Strategies, a consulting company focused on growth strategies for commercial enterprises while managing its own growth portfolio. Prior to these ventures, Kelly was the Vice President of Industry Growth at Applied Minds in Burbank, California, which specializes in radical innovation projects for tech companies and aerospace. Kelly spent 14 years at Northrop Grumman Aerospace and held positions of Vice President for Aerospace Strategy and the Sector Vice President for Strategy, Innovation, and Business Development. He began his career at Lockheed Aircraft and worked for 16 years at the famed Skunk Works, focusing on next-generation aircraft and the convergence of technology, business development, and business operations to realize new aircraft designs. A Baha'i since his declaration in 1981, Kelly has served on 3 spiritual assemblies. He has led numerous creative Baha'i events, including proclamations, community outreach, and fundraising. Kelly is also the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Sterling Ballet Company, a nonprofit organization whose purpose is to make professional ballet productions accessible to family and community audiences. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Whalen.
Thank you, Peimani. That's a wonderful introduction there. I hope I can live up to all of those things. And thank you to your family. You know, I've been looking at and watching Modern Perspectives videos for a little while now, because I am always learning, and I love gleaning insights from others that you've had on this program. And I'm honored in that regard, and hopefully I can provide additional insights that are useful and valuable to others, particularly in this topic. So what we're going to talk about today is ethics in the corporate world. And as I have been preparing for this talk, one of the things that's interesting this time of the year, the first 3 weeks of March, roughly, Baha'is across the world are engaged in fasting. This is the absence of food or drink between the time of sunrise until sunset. And it's an interesting time in that, in addition to prayer and meditation, that one might engage more so than other times of the year, it provides us a unique time to reflect on, our lives, every part of our lives, our spiritual life, our work life, our family life, how we are in our communities. And in that reflection, with some exercises in meditation that I'm probably not as good at as some of you, it provides a time to gain insight in what areas of your life are working well, what areas that you can improve across the board. And I think about, in this case, preparing for this conversation, I've thought about work quite a bit, about the company or the companies, about different ventures that I'm engaged with. to try to ensure alignment of the principles that we're going to talk about today with the work that I do personally day to day. When we talk about ethics in the corporate world, it's not always easy to reconcile what that is. What does that mean as it relates to the work world, the companies that we work in, the enterprises that we work in? A lot of us will worship during the week on given days, whether it's Sunday or Saturday or Fridays, and we immerse ourselves in that environment. And then we leave that environment and get on with the rest of the tasks, doing the chores around the house or preparing for the workday and things of this nature. We don't always put those two environments together in so much that our spiritual existence is aligned with our material existence. And so I'd like to talk about that as well as we go through the day. As far as context of this talk, I'd like to ask each of you to consider in your past a time that you've been at work and you've seen something or you've experienced something that challenges your perspectives and your perceptions. There may be differences in what you experience, the interactions that you have with other people, versus the kind of values that you grew up with, what you were given to from your mom and dad as far as how you treat people. And I'd like you to think about that time as we get started here. Think about that situation where it didn't go right. You were in a situation, something happened. Maybe you had an altercation with somebody in the workplace where they said something to you that was offensive. Maybe the company made really big profits that year and you see people getting bonuses and you look around and you ask, gee, seems like I should be eligible for some of that profit since I endeavored so hard to do well. Capitalist corporations seem to be inconsistent with equity. And we're seeing that with a lot of elevated concerns brought about by voices in society. So in this talk, we want to look at the practical motivations because companies are motivated by practical considerations. We want to look into the spiritual dimension and how that affects large enterprises. It doesn't have to be just companies, it can be any enterprise. And how enterprises can be transformed to coexist in a potentially, what we would like to believe is a future civilization of contribution, fairness, stronger entrepreneurialism. That is to say, we don't make compromises to move businesses and products forward, but we also don't make compromises in the way we treat people and the way we treat other institutions, so that one day we can evolve our sense of prosperity. I'll refer in this talk mostly to Baha'i writings on ethics and morale in companies. The writings are from what we call central figures. Central figures of the Baha'i faith represent those who are the authorities of the written word or their interpretation or their application. And I'll cite who those authorities are as we go along. First, though, I'd like to give a little bit of a background into the Baha'i faith itself, because I think this background is important as a framework for some of the thoughts that I'm going to bring to you. And hopefully we can intermesh this spiritual context with the material context. One of the concepts that the Baha'i faith holds and discusses frequently is the concept of progressive revelation. And in a sense, this concept refers to really the history of the revealed word of God for humanity. It is the Baha'i belief that all of the manifestations come from the same source. They all have the same purpose, the same essential divine purpose. They were inspired by God. They were given a responsibility to deliver a message to humanity, to evolve humanity's spiritual character and his material existence. We see this in the manifestations that have come before. We see this in Abraham, Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster. We see this in Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, and then most recently, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. The message that each one of these manifestations provided talked about the spiritual essence of humanity. And they also referred to the social existence. That is the interaction that we have one with another across our communities, or even as we see today across our world. Two common themes, the social constructs or brotherhood. The concept of brotherhood was emphasized during Christ's dispensation. He used this word in the other gospels that were written to discuss brotherhood. That is, that we're as brothers to one another. And it also evokes a kind of unity that mankind has with one another. And it's just not relegated to brothers, that is, not males. It's really relating to the spirit of humanity, and that we would treat one another as we would treat siblings, being very close in character and in our life's experiences, and really recognize sort of that oneness. Today in the Baha'i dispensation, we've been given further enlightenment into this concept of the twofold, what's called a twofold moral purpose. That is to attend to one's own spiritual and intellectual growth. And the second one is to contribute to the transformation, the discourses and the transformation of society. And so these two spheres of existence that we cohabitate, one being our spiritual existence and the other one being material civilization, they come together in all of the other conversations. We know that the spiritual concept is discussed in prior dispensations, but we also hear discussions about justice, which is something that exists on this plane of existence. In fact, in Leviticus, this is the what's considered the Old Testament, in chapter 19, it said, you shall have just, so this is in relation to businesses and commerce, and there's a lot of scripture that discusses this. You shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah. An ephah is a reference to a bushel, for example. It's a unit of measurement. And a just hin. A hin is a unit of measurement for liquid. It'd be about 1.5 gallons. I am the Lord your God who brought you out from the land of Egypt. This is a reference to the Israelites. You shall thus observe all my statutes and all my ordinances and do them. I am the Lord. This is in Leviticus. And so you see here where he's discussing the concept of justice. And it's justice related to trade. Trade is a concept that began very, very early on, and it enabled people to work with one another. I have crops, you have livestock. I need livestock in order to feed my family. You need crops in order to feed your family. Can we trade? And architectures of value had been created from there. Value then reduced to a monetary sort of instrument. And in some cases later in history, we see the introduction of credit. All of these different evolutions of business and commerce followed a very important ingredient. And that is the trust that one person would have with another person, or one group would have with another group. Trust is very important in commerce. Trust is what permits the Silk Road to exist many centuries ago as a trading route, where I could pick up a cart of material, let's say furs, and I could carry it 1,000 miles to another part of the country, and I could trade these furs for spice or other things. And I extended the trust to the fur trader that I would actually get the spices back that we agreed upon. And many months would pass in order for these transactions to take place. But at the root of it was trust. And if you think about business and commerce, without trust, it would all dissipate. It would all fall apart. And so we realize that in business and commerce, that trust is really the coming together of spirits. That in order for people to coexist in this arena and for it to evolve in a way that served humanity, that this concept of trust or coming together and agreeing in unity of thought, in unity of purpose, that they would each follow their own commitments. Trust is a very important binding contribution to humanity today. Civilizations are based on trust. We extend trust to people all the time. We're walking down the street and we see our neighbor and we say hello. And the neighbor says, hey, I need some help with something in my house. Can you help me? Of course, I'll help you. I'll come over and help you. And you trust that your neighbor has a real problem that needs to be solved, that your neighbor's not tricking you. People intrinsically want to trust others. It's innate. It's part of who we are. There are circumstances where we don't trust, and it's likely because somebody has eroded trust. And this tends to break down because that trust that's eroded pulls humanity apart. This causes disunity. And any disunity in humanity will cause its dissolution, not its integration, but its disintegration. So trust is an interesting concept in business and commerce. And it also shows how business and commerce possesses intrinsic virtue in order for it to work. So that's one of the messages that I think that we can use to begin this conversation. We talked just a minute ago about this idea of the material and the spiritual conditions coexisting. Let me read this. This is from a letter in 2018 by the Universal House of Justice. This is just one little snippet that came from that letter. They said, supreme happiness is man's, and he beholds the signs of God in the world and in the human soul, if he urges on the steed of high endeavor in the arena of civilization and justice. And in commerce and in business, these are fundamental underpinnings among many, but they're fundamental underpinnings, which helps us to advance civilization. Where we traded fur for spices many years ago, now we're trading concrete and iron and technology for commerce today, for revenue, for a stated revenue source. And so the model, which includes trust, cooperation, people of diverse backgrounds bringing together different components that are put together in a unique and innovative way, which instead of furs versus spice now permits us to build bridges across caverns. It permits us to build cities. It permits us to have plumbing and sanitation. It permits us to have a nice standard of living. We can educate our children, and we can do so many things that we couldn't do before because of these intrinsic common purpose that we find both in civilization as well as in the business underpinnings. So let me now talk about the context of a company. If you look at Webster, you'll probably get, or if you look at a dozen different definitions, you'll probably get more than a dozen sources. You'll probably get more than a dozen different answers on the definition. The reason I say this is because I'm going to give you my definition. And if you looked up Webster, you'll probably get a different definition. That's okay. In my experience, the definition of a company is a formal structure of an enterprise that employs people to do tasks that make products or services for the purpose of engaging in commerce. That's today's definition of a business. I think tomorrow's definition of a business will include the concept of serving the common good, serving humanity. And that is that if your business is not in some way serving humanity, it may not be an enduring business. And this is something for all of us to think about when we contemplate, if I wanted to start a business, which I did a couple of years ago, how would I do that? What principles would drive that? And if one of the principles is not that it would serve in some way humanity, it may not be a long-standing business. Think about that. Corporations that exist in a modern democracy, They are sometimes called companies, sometimes called corporations. For the sake of this conversation, it really doesn't matter. Those are nuances. They're not that important for this chat. Typically, corporations and companies are private enterprises, not always. They are for-profit companies, and there are companies that are organized without the intent to make a profit, that is, with the intent to serve a purpose. Companies are legal entities. They are under the statutory authority of a given municipality. It could be a state, it could be a city. Companies are formed for temporary, sometimes purposes, and sometimes for ongoing purposes. The first such companies that are recorded as structured enterprises were the Dutch and East India Company. Some have heard of this. And these were companies that specifically traded across lands and continents purposefully so that they could exchange goods that each other didn't have. There was also the introduction of monetary nuances in these as they went along. Companies can be owned by one or many people, and this is important because then we get into talking about stakeholders in a company. And when we think about ethics in a company, ethics to one group of people may be different than the ethical standards of another group of people, another group of stakeholders. And it's important to try to reconcile different desires based on the different stakeholders. Companies generally intend to marshal resources and people and turn those resources into products or services of worth. If they're not of worth, then they won't be interesting to people and they won't be purchased and the company won't continue to exist. Now let's talk about ethics in business. We know what a company is. What are ethics inside of a company? And it's important to understand definitions here, and I'll be a little bit more specific in the definitions. According to Webster, ethics are a set of moral principles, a theory or system of moral values. So the idea of morals come into play when we talk about ethics. Another definition, the principles of conduct governing an individual or group. So how we conduct ourselves. And I think it's good that they characterize a group. Group conduct is as important as individual conduct. And I think as you reflected early in the conversation, you can see where perhaps one of the bad experiences you had wasn't because of an individual, but perhaps it was because of a group. A third definition, a set of moral issues or aspects such as rightness. The discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. This is another definition. And then ethics and morals are often interchangeable. That is, the terms are interchangeable. In modern businesses, ethics are typically a set of rules. And this is sometimes a difficult thing to understand. If ethics are rules, why do we have ethics and not rules? And it helps structured apparatuses to exist on a set of rules, what you can do and what you shouldn't do. The do's and don'ts of a business help adjudicate inconsistencies. An employee may have a grievance against a company, and that grievance is adjudicated against a set of rules that are theoretically inspired by moral values. And so there's a lot of different ways that this is looked at, but modern companies will look at a set of rules and a set of morals that guide those rules, but most often it's rules, it's not necessarily morals. Morals and ethics can oftentimes be described as doing the right thing, and doing the right thing is a little bit squishier than rules, and so it's important to have the specifics laid out. Shoghi Effendi said this about morals. He said, Baha'u'llah teaches that material civilization is incomplete, insufficient, and that divine civilization must be established. And when he talks about civilization, he's talking about where we exist in this plane of existence. This is not the spiritual aspect of who we are. This is not our spirit that at some point graduates from this existence and moves to the next existence. He's talking about material civilization. It's talking about nations, it's talking about communities, it's talking about business structures, these kinds of things. So let me repeat, Baha'u'llah teaches that material civilization is incomplete, insufficient, and that divine civilization must be established. And so this is all of those things that I mentioned. It's nations, it's businesses, it's states, it's apparatus, it's municipal organizations, that they exist within a divine inspiration. Divine civilization must be established. In the context of divine civilization, he says, and further to the contrast, he says, material civilization concerns the world of matter or bodies, but divine civilization is the realm of ethics and moralities. Until the moral degree is advanced and human virtues attain a lofty level, happiness for mankind is impossible. Until the moral degree is advanced and human virtues attain a lofty level, happiness for mankind is impossible across all of our occupations. So the first example, we talked about trust before. And now in this second example, we get to the idea that civilization with ethics and morals has a divine component to it. Okay. Now I'll give you a little bit of insight into the company that I have. This is a company that I purchased, my former partner, we had a partnership at first, and he fully intended to retire. And so I purchased the company outright from him. But this company ascribes to the concept, not of ethics, but of values. And we use the word values specifically because we want to get to what people inculcate as part of their cultural personality. So we set up a system of values. There are 5 values. And in those set of values, there are integrity, leadership, people, quality, and community. Those are the 5 values. The first 4 values are the values we ask employees to exhibit while they're inside the gate, so to speak, on the campus. So that's the first 4. The 5th value, the value of community, is a value we ask our employees to exhibit outside of the company framework, that is within their communities, in their homes, in their neighborhoods, things of this nature. And we ask them to think about their community because many Baha'is believe that service is a way of evolving one's faculties of compassion, of care, of concern about others around us, of selflessness, for example. These are the kinds of virtues that are required in order to exhibit care and for another. Now, we're not trying to grow people's capacities, that's up to them, but we would like to encourage the exercise of caring about the community so that they can bring those experiences into the workplace. We don't hold them accountable to that. That would be, that just wouldn't fit right for me. I ask them to hold themselves accountable to that. Whereas the first 4 values that are moral in nature, I do ask them to have a conversation once a year about during their performance. Their physical performance is not as important to me as the way they show up. And I think the way they show up from the standpoint of the care that they have for other people is very important, relates to a stronger team that we build and a stronger support system for some employees who may not be as strong as others and require additional training or additional care. And all of those things tend to resolve problems before they emerge. It's a very interesting dynamic. There's a lot of studies that have been done in companies where when companies care about their people and extend the conversations regarding morals, ethics, and these kinds of things, and ask employees to care about one another, these result in much better performance, much better attendance, less people sick, less people doing things inadvertently or in some cases nefariously in the company, because they have a sense that they're part of a team that cares about them. This is very important because we are a humanity and we want to be working with others who are human. The tenets of a business framework are important. I talked about values. It's one of the tenets of a business framework. But if you're an employee, not just understanding the framework, it's also important to understand the purpose of a company. What is the purpose? What does it serve? And with what it serves, is it something that you believe in? I asked you to think about as you are an employee, and many people fit roles that are different. I can be first day on the job and I'm a contributor to the specific tasks that move the company forward. I could be a manager or a director in the company where I take vision and overarching requirements, and I turn those into tasks that I can provide to my employees and manage them so that we can attain those outcomes. So I can be in sort of the middle part of the company. I can be a principal in the company, a CEO, something like that. And I may have developed the tenets of the business that ostensibly make it enduring. Each one of these different roles are important in terms of the morals, the values, and the ethics, because we bear the responsibility of holding to them so that whatever the purpose of the company is can be met. If you walk into a company on the first day without knowing the purpose of the company, you might be surprised. And so I would encourage people, and I encourage my own people, do you know about our company on the first day of the interview? This is before they're hired. Do you know about our company? Some say no. And I might ask, do you want to work for a company and you don't know their purpose? You know, we can schedule an interview another time. I'd like you to do some research on our company and, you know, figure out if it's something for you. Because I want them to be happy and proud and be able to extol the virtues of the work that they do and the company that they do it in when they're at the dinner table or things like this. So what the company does is important, and your affiliation with that company is also important. And so when we think about ethics in business, sometimes the ethics come back to us as individuals to make sure that we're aligned in the first place. And we ask that question early on in the interviewing process. Okay, so we talk a little bit about the tenets of the business framework as far as its purpose, and also the people in the company. Who are the people? What do they represent to you as a manager or a CEO? So this is on the manager side now. What do you expect from those people in the company? And how do you, this is important, how do you best harness their talents and capacities, their potentialities? And this is important because if you're an employee looking to take a position in a company, you want to know that your moral character is aligned with the moral character of that company, and that the purpose of that company is aligned with what you believe is right. But if you're working in the company and you're hiring somebody, you bear not only those same responsibilities to look for alignment, but you also bear the responsibility to understand how you can harness the capacities of that person. Not all companies are good at harnessing the full capacity of that person. And I think in some part, because the overarching structure, the basis of how the company is either formed or how it functions in its purpose, the tenets of the business framework, are not clear to that manager. And so you may not be able to get the best out of the talents and capacities of that person. When we talk about talents and capacities of a person, this is one of the most interesting concepts for me as a guy that works in a business. One of the things that a government asks us to do is to put a tagline on all of our recruiting memos that say, we do not discriminate against, and then there's a litany of things that we don't discriminate against. And this list changes periodically as new voices come forward and say, you forgot about this, you forgot about that. And what I realize every time we update that statement is, why do we forget about these things? Why are we not all inclusive to all people so that we can capture the imagination, the talent, the potential of every person that we hire? And the reason is because the statement starts with what we don't do. And so even though we put that, statutorily, we put that on our hiring materials, it's not the first word, it's the last word. The first word is what we do. And what we do is that we invite people of diverse backgrounds to come forward. We want people that come from different places in the world, different experiences in the world, people who have lived in adversity and have grown out of it and have learned skills that other people may not possess. Problem-solving skills is one of the most important elements that a company could bring forward. It's hard to bring that forward in people if you hire the same kind of people all the time. They're all going to solve the problem the same way. It's to our advantage to reach out into communities with diverse backgrounds so that we can draw forward their experiences and help them to turn those experiences into solutions, into new ideas, into new concepts. And this is where diversity creates an even better performing organization. I don't want to say what we don't do. I want to say what we do. And when we do it, and when we do it well, and when we work to harness the individual potentialities, we thrive. We thrive in a way that and diverse companies will demonstrate this time and time again. Companies who not just hire diverse candidates, but hire them intentionally so that they can draw forward their ideas, right? And so this is something that we have seen. In fact, just a personal story. When I was, this is about 1977, I was a young lad. I was in school, middle school or high school, something like that. And my mom, such a beautiful soul. She's passed, but she's just such a wonderful influence on me. She's also my spiritual mother. We would stand in line at the supermarket, which was more of a market than a supermarket in the Midwest where we lived. And things weren't really materially very good for us. We were on some pretty difficult times. And my mom had this bucket of coupons, and she would look through the coupons and she would pick out a coupon and say, I get 50 cents off here, and I get a quarter off there. And this is a double coupon. I get a little bit more off there. And when they got all done ringing up the tab and they would deduct the coupon, she would next pull out of her handbag, she would pull out the food stamps. This is the government gave us this food stamps so that we could pay for grocery items because we weren't doing so good. The other guy, it was a small town, the guys that were packing the food in the bags, the box boys, they call them box boys because they were actually cardboard boxes like Costco, not like Trader Joe's. They were called box boys. They were friends of mine. They went to the same school that I did. It was a small town. And they chuckled. And they called my mom coupon lady, food stamp lady. And I felt a little bit of a tinge of embarrassment and of humiliation because I was the guy that was the son of the mom who was the food stamp lady. And I realized that this humility that I was feeling is something that could propel me forward. This is a difficult situation that my family is going through. And yet we'll get through this. And we did. We were home front pioneers in this little Midwestern town, and the skills that my dad had, it was difficult for him to apply those skills to the factories and whatnot that were around that town. And so we had some struggles. And what we learned from that is that adversity is something that could help strengthen the character. And all of the time that my buddies would call me the kid that is the kid of the food stamp lady, it gave me a little bit more strength, a little bit more resolve, a little bit more steadfastness. And now I've had, as you saw in the beginning, I've had a pretty good go of it as far as my career. And I think a lot of that was inspired by the troubles that I had as a kid. And so I think about others in the world and in our communities that are coming forward. And I interview every person that works in our company, even though they may work for somebody else. I don't ask about their skills and their background. I really want to know about their values. But when I talk to them, I want to know their story. I want to know what motivates them, what they think about, what they do in their community service, because it speaks to the character and how that character was formed by adversity. It's a really powerful thing, not to ask about, why is a manhole round? These are some questions that you get in some of the fancy Silicon Valley companies, but rather, why do you care about your community? It's a whole different, it's a whole different framework. And it gets to this divine civilization that Shoghi Effendi and Baha'u'llah talked about. Through diversity, you can achieve amazing things. And I think talented teams come forward much more frequently with diverse backgrounds. Okay, Let's see, listening to new ideas. I think also one of the things that we do in companies is we hire people, but we're not as good at listening to new ideas. And so I want to talk about that just a little bit, about how you communicate to people and how you invite them to communicate back. First of all, I think it's so important for us to speak to one another with friendliness, with cordial interactions, whether it's hallway conversations or emails or in meetings especially, and in particular when meetings have opposing viewpoints that are being put together, that it's very important for us not to allow the stress of the work environment to deter us from being cordial to one another, respectful. Baha'u'llah says, "Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Deal ye one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with friendliness and fellowship." And he doesn't exclude that for Sundays. This is throughout our entire lives. Shoghi Effendi says in this, this is Baha'i Administration. This is a very insightful book. Recognition of the nobility of each human soul. Recognition of the nobility of each human soul. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter how difficult we may have an experience with them in the business environment. They have nobility. Recognition of the nobility of each human soul implies a standard of discourse in which dignity, courtesy, and mutual respect guide interactions between dialogue participants. Think of yourself as an instrument of unity, which so exemplifies the spirit of universal love and fellowship as to evoke in the minds of others the vision of that future city of God. God can exist in our companies. It's hard to imagine a future where that happens, but when it happens, it will be a very, very pleasant place to be. There's a UCLA professor of Baha'i Studies, UCLA University of California at Los Angeles. His name is Nader Saidi. He says this, he says, "Since humans are created rich in their spiritual potentials, human nobility requires treating humans as noble and endowed with inalienable rights. This nobility necessitates participation of humans in determination of their lives. But this self-determination is in turn dependent on a culture which rejects prejudice, rejects imitation of others, and instead encourages individuals to think for themselves and seek knowledge independently." This is a difficult concept to inculcate in the business environment. However, it is something that will help us as we go forward. Why? Because independent thinking destroys ideologies of hate and estrangement. It undermines prejudice. It encourages a culture of peace and unity. The emphasis on realization of potentialities is inseparable from Baha'u'llah's concept of human dignity. This last point, how do we realize the potentialities of the people with whom we work, whether they work for us, adjacent to us, or they're our managers? The emphasis on realization of potentialities is inseparable from the concept of human dignity. This is an interesting conversation to ponder. One of the things that people have struggles with, I've had many struggles with this, is attaining outcomes based on consultation or based on conversations. We all engage in meetings every day. And so this next quick conversation is about the concept of consultation. How can enterprises come to better outcomes through the concept of consultation? It's defined as the practice of collective decision-making. Baha'u'llah, in his tablets, he wrote this. He said, "The great being saith, the heaven of divine wisdom is illumined with the two luminaries of consultation and compassion." And so luminaries, we think of the heavens, we think of the sun and the moon. We think the sun brightens our day, the moon illuminates our night. And these two luminaries are consultation and compassion. Consultation bestoweth greater awareness and transmuteth conjecture into certitude. It has been ordained by Baha'u'llah as a means by which agreement is to be reached and a collective course of action defined. Man should weigh his opinions with the utmost sincerity, calmness, and composure before expressing his own views. He should carefully consider the views already advanced by others. And this suggests a degree of humility, to be able to step back from your own views so that you can consider others. If he finds that a previously expressed opinion is more true and worthy, he should accept it immediately and not willfully hold to an opinion of his own. By this excellent method, he endeavors to arrive at unity and truth. There are many writings on the concept of consultation, and what these writings propel us forward to is a better extrapolation of different viewpoints into a common conclusion that is informed by a divine presence, because we supplicate in advance of our consultation. And when we substitute our humility for listening to somebody else's point of view, substitute our ego, for somebody else's point of view, we engage in collective ideas and arriving at a truth that might be more compelling than what we could come up as an individual. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this speaks to the enduring nature of teams working together to solve a problem. This can very much be applied in the workplace. And it has to do, I believe, in the future ethical composition of companies. Togetherness, consultation, arriving at decisions together. And I realize that sometimes it takes a little bit longer to permit all voices to come together and be heard. But in a lot of cases, it creates for an enduring answer. And the time that is saved in the long run is time well spent up front when you're gathering everybody's viewpoint. It's very inclusive. As far as compensation goes, I want to talk about this because there are words in the Bahá'í writings about the material part of our existence. Of course, companies have a responsibility of fair treatment for their employees. You should never work in a company or be affiliated with a company that doesn't treat their employees fairly. Let them die on the vine. Associate yourself with companies that are fair. Companies should focus their attention on doing their business better, not doing society better. And one of the things that companies can do inside of their company is to focus on their people, really, and think about fair treatment and engage in dialogue with their people and draw forward good ideas. This is not done very well by companies. I can say that based on experience. There is a degree of social justice that needs to occur within companies. The equitable distribution of profits, for example, the equitable pay for work across the different demographics and the genders. These are all things that have to come into accord, and they all should be guided by spiritual principles. Justice is one of those principles. The House of Justice, Universal House of Justice in 2010 penned a letter that said this, among other things. It said, social justice will be attained only whenever every member of society enjoys a relative degree of material prosperity and gives due regard to the acquisition of spiritual qualities. The House also said, I think this is Baha'u'llah Gleanings. He said, the whole duty of man in this day is to attain that share of the flood of grace which God poureth forth for him. Let none therefore consider the largeness or smallness of the receptacle. The portion of some might lie in the palm of a man's hand. The portion of others might fill a cup, and others even a gallon measure. Now, what this also says is that different people have different expectations. They have different appetites. One person might aspire to lead a large organization. Another person might aspire to work within the organization and not take on those additional responsibilities. And it's important for us to understand that not everybody wants the same outcomes. And this quotation speaks to that and permits us to see everyone as a unique individual. Now, as far as profit and profit sharing, this is a conversation that I'm going to try to get to the end here. There's a lot of dialogue about the purpose of companies in making money. And I think these quotes will help us to come to terms with the concept of actually making money inside of a company. So this is Shoghi Effendi. He says, referring to the exigencies of the material world, the realities of the material world, Baha'u'llah has affirmed that to every end has been assigned a means for its accomplishment. So a company has an end and it has a means. A natural conclusion to be drawn from reflection of this fundamental principle is that vigilance must be exercised in distinguishing means from ends. This gets to our ethics. Otherwise, what is intended as a mere instrument could easily become the very goal of an individual's life. That is to say, if the goal of your company is to make money, it is not found in virtue. It is not found in moral certitude. It is found in materialism. And this is not conducive to the betterment of mankind. It is conducive to the betterment of the person who architected that structure to begin with. He further says, the legitimacy of wealth depends, this is Abdul Baha. The legitimacy of wealth depends on how it is acquired and on how it is expended. In this connection, he has stated that wealth is praiseworthy in the highest degree if it is acquired by an individual's own efforts and the grace of God in commerce, agriculture, crafts, and industry. If the measures, and there's others, but this is in the quotation. If the measures adopted by the individual in generating wealth serve to enrich the generality of the people, so this is the purpose of the business. And if the wealth thus obtained is expended for philanthropic purposes and the promotion of knowledge or the establishment of schools and industry and the advancement of education and in general for the welfare of society. And so the building of wealth, if it is used for the human good, is something to be extolled. If it is accumulation of wealth as the end result of an individual person, this is not something that's extolled, none at all. So this helps us grapple with what do we do with large profits of companies. Now, that doesn't mean that distribution of those profits should not be equitable, and that is up to the company in terms of their purpose. Moving on, a couple of other things here. Adversity, we all experienced adversity in our business. Is the adversity yours? What is your experience? Sometimes we see other people's experiencing adversity, and it troubles us. I've had a couple of experiences watching someone slowly fall into the crosshairs of another person, or an example like that. And it's difficult for us to deal with that. And sometimes we don't have the tools to come to that person's aid. And I encourage everyone to think about, once you establish your moral framework for your company, or you determine what it is for the company that you currently work for, that you work to adjudicate within yourself how that person could be taken care of, so to speak, within that moral framework, because you want to come to the rescue of others if you see them somehow in the crosshairs of someone. No matter what, maintain your dignity, maintain your nobility. Shoghi Effendi says it is only through suffering that the nobility of character can make itself manifest. So as we started, I said, imagine yourself in the positions of, you're an employee and you're working on the factory floor, you're working in the office, or you're the manager and you have employees that you have to work with and leaders. You could also be a shareholder. Everybody has a different perspective that they come from, and all must be aligned within the moral framework of this company in order for all of their needs to be satisfied. Everybody comes in under a different premise, and they all deserve to have that premise rewarded, assuming that the company is structured correctly. So think about it in those terms. And finally, I would just want to end with this. Bayan mentioned this at the beginning, but I think it's a good instruction for how we live our lives and how we present ourselves, even in the workplace. Think of these words. Be generous in prosperity and thankful in adversity. Be worthy of the trust of thy neighbor and look upon him with a bright and friendly face. Be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answerer to the cry of the needy, a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge. Be fair in thy judgment and guarded in thy speech. Be unjust to no man and show all meekness to all men. Be as a lamp unto them that walk in darkness, a joy to the sorrowful, a sea for the thirsty, a haven for the distressed, an upholder and defender of the victim of oppression. Let integrity and uprightness distinguish all thine acts. Be a home for the stranger, a balm to the suffering, a tower of strength for the fugitive. Be eyes to the blind and a guiding light under the feet of the erring. Be an ornament of the countenance of truth, a crown to the brow of fidelity, a pillar of the temple of righteousness, a breath of life to the body of mankind, an ensign of the hosts of justice, a luminary above the horizon of virtue, a dew to the soil of the human heart, an ark on the ocean of knowledge, a sun in the heaven of bounty, a gem on the diadem of wisdom, a shining light in the firmament of thy generation, a fruit upon the tree of humility. And with that, thank you everybody for taking some time.
Thank you so much. That was a really interesting perspective. We really appreciate that. So if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat. The first question is, do you apply the affirmative action to your own company? And if not, why not?
Well, it is a good question. We have had statutory requirements to apply affirmative action because one of our customers is the US government, and we have done that. However, I believe that everybody should be treated completely equally. I recognize that affirmative action is something that has benefited a disenfranchised part of our communities. There is a value to affirmative action in creating opportunities for people who generally would not have had those opportunities before. I am not opposed to affirmative action as the CEO of the company. I prefer to invite people from all backgrounds, because I actually think that there are people who come from backgrounds that are even more distressed than the specifics that are contained within the statutes. I think as I said, I think it's a phase that our society must go through, where we must create opportunities for people who are disenfranchised. I'm looking forward to the day where it is no longer necessary.
Did you also mean diversity of culture as well as gender? Yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and for me, I try to distinguish diversity not racial diversity, not gender diversity, not anything specific. What I'm looking for is the diverse characteristics of people. I think at some point we're going to get to a future where diversity of thought becomes more compelling. And it just so happens that people who come from ethnic backgrounds present diversity of thought. People come from racial backgrounds, present themselves with diversity of thought. Where our companies, at least in this country, are coming to is our companies that have a substantial progress in inviting people of diverse racial and ethnic and cultural and gender backgrounds. That's what we're doing today. That is not the big challenge that I see. The big challenge I see is harnessing their ideas. Because oftentimes, this is what I saw, particularly in the big company. I saw people of diverse backgrounds being brought into the company to meet statutory requirements, which missed the purpose altogether. And secondly, their ideas were not being considered. And this, to me, was the wake-up call, that it's the person that we're trying to find. We're trying to find the diversity of thought that comes from that human being and the experiences that human being have had in their lives. And we kind of missed, the realization of the benefits of diversity. I don't want to be very specific about the backgrounds that people come from. I want all backgrounds without exception. I want people from Syria. I want people from the Mideast. I want people from the Far East. I want people from Russia. I want people from disenfranchised communities from a material perspective. I want people who come from big universities. There's a lot of conversation out there. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors. He talks about in his book, Outliers, that companies that recruit from the big schools and they get the top 10% from the top 10 schools, they suffer from a lack of diversity. They think they get the best, but they don't, because they're trying to harness the benefits of an individual instead of the benefits of the community of people that can actually contribute to solving problems. Getting C students from B schools or B students from C schools would be much more effective. So I'm trying to look beyond the conversation that we're having today, the discourse today in society. I'm trying to look beyond that and say, we have to step beyond, obviously, the segmentation that we've had in the past, and we have to be completely inclusive. And once we bring those diverse people into our company, we have to listen to them, and we have to understand how they can solve problems differently, how they can create solutions differently.
Okay, the next question is, I truly enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. How do you compete as an ethical business in a business environment that's all about winning and doesn't adhere to the same set of ethics and moralities? The competition doesn't play by the same moral rules.
My company is not as successful, and I'm okay with that. We do our best every day, and sometimes we win, and a lot of times, most of the times, we don't win. I don't know what else to say on that. I see it, I see it every day, and I wince, I grit my teeth, and I think of Shoghi Effendi's quote on adversity. No matter where we are in an organization, if we let down, and I have this conversation with all of our employees, if we set our integrity aside, it is a slippery slope. We will realize the consequences of that action. We must maintain steadfastness. I also have hope. I have hope that doing good things will be rewarded at some point.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all of our questions. So thank you so much again for your talk. This was really interesting, and this session will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel next week. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Our speaker next week will be Erica Batdorf, and her topic is transforming your prayer and meditation practice. So again, these are every Saturday at noon Eastern time. And if you're not on our mailing list, I've put our contact form in the chat. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.